Hey, hey, mamas. Welcome back to another awesome episode of the Mama Work It podcast. So glad you're here. If you are new to Mama Work It, we support women in the juggle of mom life, work life, wife life, fill in the blank life. I am your host, Marissa Lonick, working mama of 4 kiddos and founder of Mama Work It. So excited for today's episode, not just for you, but honestly for me, you guys. So we've got Madison Wetherill. She is the woman behind Cook at Home Mom, where she inspires busy families to embrace wholesome, delicious cooking. Based in sunny Arizona, Madison juggles life as a wife and mom to 3 energetic boys, blending the chaos of family life with her passion for creating meals that nourish the body and soul. Madison's culinary journey began after her college years when cooking shifted from a necessity to a passion. Today, her blog is a trusted resource for approachable, flavor-packed recipes that cater to a variety of dietary preferences, including gluten-free, Whole30, paleo, and keto. With an emphasis on balance and wellness, Madison proves that eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated or diet-focused. It's just about creating meals you love and sharing them with the people who matter most. Her recipes and tips have been featured in publications like Redfin, and she's cultivated a community of over 65,000 followers on Instagram. From slow cooker and air fryer guides to healthy meal plans and grocery tips, Madison's blog is like this virtual dining room where families can find inspiration for everyday cooking. Beyond her own podcast, the Vine podcast, and her second blog, Joyfully Mad, Madison has been featured on industry-leading shows like the Food Blogger Pro podcast, the Biz Chicks podcast, Eat Blog Talk, and the Blogger Genius podcast, where she shares her expertise in food blogging, business strategy, and content creation. And now she can add Mama Work It to that list. So whether she's experimenting with new ingredients or hosting family dinners, Madison's mission is simple: make cooking at home easy, enjoyable, and always full of flavor. I can't wait to dive into our topic today, Madison. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much, Marissa. And thank you for that introduction and just kind of covering all the bases. But I'm excited to dive into all the things today.
Me too. Me too. All right. So we heard a little bit about your journey, but tell us in your own words, like, how did you land into this food blogging world?
Yeah, well, like you said, I am also a mom who works and juggle a couple businesses. And culinary wise, where it really began is in childhood, with my lack of culinary knowledge, interest, any of those things. I grew up as a very picky eater, and I remember like having very simple, very kid friendly meals growing up. And also at that same time, kind of watching my mom just navigate what that looked like, and navigate making multiple meals for multiple people, and honestly kind of falling out of love with cooking. I don't know that she really ever had like a strong love of cooking, but I just watched the toll that it took over time. And then fast forward to when I was an adult and, finally had like a kitchen of my own, I finally started to realize that I was lacking in these like very basic skills, and somehow had this interest to start figuring out how to cook. And then actually in college, I had a job at a steakhouse that really just kind of opened the door for me to tons of different foods and culinary experiences, and just different cuisines from different cultures. And I think, the combination of those two things of like having that independence of being able to start figuring this out for myself, and then having those just like amazing culinary experiences really helped me to start to break down that picky eating, habit that I had for my whole childhood. And that's kind of what got me into just really falling in love with cooking and enjoying the process, but also just enjoying like the actual food part too, and being able to experience tons of new foods and just, grow in that over time.
Okay, so you were a picky eater as a kid.
Mhm. Yep.
Assuming you grew out of that a little bit, are you more
Yeah, I
adventurous
would say
now?
so.
Okay.
There's still things that like I maybe would like, oh, I don't know about that, but I would say I have a very like full repertoire of things that I am like willing or excited to eat, veggies included, things like that. I, have a couple of things that I'm like, that's not for me, but for the most part, I'm willing to try things and I'm willing to enjoy things. And I think a lot of that came from cooking the things myself, but also just experiencing food in different ways where like I always share the example of like growing up, we ate a lot of like frozen vegetables or vegetables from a can. And for some reason, we never really like roasted vegetables. And then when I finally discovered like roasting vegetables is like the key to making them delicious, then all of a sudden I was like, well, wait a minute. Now I have like other things I want to try to figure out. Like, how do I make this in a way that I enjoy it? Um, so yeah, over time, definitely grew out of a lot of that. And I mean, I'm sure someone could probably test me with something that I wouldn't like, but I'm much more willing to try things now.
Well, I think it's hard to find someone who likes everything, right? So yeah, yeah. But that makes me feel good. It's like there's hope, And I was kind of a picky eater too, but I feel like we've got some picky eaters here in my house. And I'm curious, do you have any thoughts on maybe what causes this or like why it affects some kids and not others? Because we've got 4 kids and probably like 2 of them are way pickier than the other 2. And it's like, we're raising them the same. So, like, what is it?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say, we're raising them the same because I have had that thought myself. So actually my middle son is the one who is and my youngest is almost 3. So who knows what he'll end up being. For now, he's a very good eater, but there's something that happens in those toddler years where things all of a sudden that they loved, they no longer want. Um, but I have had that thought of like, okay, we did the exact same thing. Like I breastfed for the certain amount of time and we did baby led weaning. Like they were raised in a very similar way. So I think there is something about just their natural disposition, like something about how they're wired. Or I know for a lot of children who struggle with picky eating, it's a texture thing. So there's a lot that goes into that as well. So I think it's very much just some of it is just how they're wired. Some of it might be the way that foods were introduced to them. Like I think back to my middle son and I'm like, well, I had a 2.5, well, 3 or 3.5 year old at that point when he started solids. So maybe my attention was split and maybe that like changed how foods were introduced, or maybe my willingness to go out of my way to introduce foods in a different way, that type of thing. I think there's a lot. It's just a complex thing that we don't see all of those, details. Um, but yeah, I think it's a lot of that. And I think a lot of it too is also how we choose to respond to that picky eating. And I'm not saying that, I want to make sure moms hear me say this. Like, I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm just saying that there are maybe, you know, you didn't try another method, or maybe something just made it too hard that you didn't want to try something else. And again, I'm saying that because I think it's a reality we all face, but I'm not saying it to point any shame or guilt to anyone because we've all been there. And, sometimes you just have to pick your battles type of thing.
Yeah, 100%. So, what would you say are like some specific things you could do preemptively to maybe lessen the chances of raising a picky eater?
Well, I think one thing is not giving up. And I want to talk a little bit about like the neuroscience behind this. I won't get too deep into it. That's not necessarily my expertise, but I've just done enough of my own research, read enough books to know. And I think it helps to kind of put into perspective why kids can sometimes struggle with new foods. When we are giving our child, especially if they're really young, something new, their brain is designed to protect them from something that feels unsafe. And new foods are often unsafe in the brain. If you think back to this, like illustration is so cool to me, but if you think back to like when little toddlers would have literally been walking around the field and picking food to eat themselves, they were, their brains were designed to protect them from foods that might be poisonous or dangerous to them. And even though we are way far away from that experience, the brain is still doing that type of thing over time. And so often what we do is we introduce a new food to a toddler and they spit it out, or they don't touch it, or they throw it on the floor, right? And we're like, well, they don't like broccoli. I guess we're just not going to try broccoli. But what actually happens over time is their experience and that exposure to that food will look very different over time. And it eventually may lead to them eating the food, but that could be, in their adulthood that they're willing to maybe try a food that they were exposed to multiple times as a child. So there's kind of a progression that happens. And like I said, sometimes the first time it's like they're going to throw it off their plate immediately, or they won't touch it. Sometimes they might play with it, and then eventually maybe they'll put it in their mouth and spit it out. And then eventually maybe they'll actually like swallow a bite of it. But that sort of progression happens again, like it could be years and years that happens. But if we don't continue to introduce the food over and over and over again, they may never get to that progression, if that makes sense. Um, and I know it can be frustrating because we don't want to waste food and we don't want to like give them something that we know they don't like. And we can get into some like specific strategies of like how we can introduce those foods. But um, that's kind of what happens in our brains and in the, the toddler or the child's brain. And I think as they get older, that compounds even more because there's a lot of other emotions that are in there too. There's like the sense of control and, dominance and things like that that make it even harder. But yeah, that's kind of like what is happening in their brains that just makes it so complicated.
No, that makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. What do you think's like the magic number of like, all right, I've given it my best effort. He really just doesn't like broccoli. Like, is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 20? What would you say?
I don't know if there is a magic number because I think you have to just keep trying and trying it in different ways. And something else to remember too is that like our taste buds change. I think it's every 10 days or something like that. So it could just be that it hasn't been enough time to kind of combat the changing taste buds and also exposing them to it enough times. Um, and so I know, like, for one of my boys, he really prefers like steamed broccoli. He would prefer that over like roasted broccoli. And so sometimes, it's just a matter of like the method and how it's being presented. And so I would say, try it 5 or 6 times, but don't be afraid to try it with different seasonings or try it with a dipping sauce. That's always a huge hit with kids. And like, that does not mean that, you're cheating or like it's not good enough if you're doing some kind of a sauce. Like, if it gets them to be exposed to the food, that's a win. And if it gets them to eat it, that's even more of a win. But I think sometimes we underestimate the impact of that exposure. Something else that can help too is even just exposing them to it in the kitchen, even before it's on their table, because there's a lot of pressure that kids like are feeling when you put something new on their plate. There's this pressure of like, I need to eat it to make mom happy. Sometimes maybe even we've like said those things like, mom spent so much time on this in the kitchen and now you're not eating it. And that makes me really sad. Like, we can sometimes say things like that that just adds to that pressure. So maybe it looks like just letting your kids help you pick it out in the grocery store or help you wash it in the, in the sink or help you chop it. Like those little types of things. No, they're not eating the food, but they're getting exposed to it, which over time has this compounding effect of helping their brain to be like, oh yeah, I've seen that thing before. This is not, something dangerous for me.
Yeah, those are such good tips. I have definitely heard too, if they can help prepare it, they're more likely to eat it, right? So like if they help in the kitchen, they're more likely to be excited to try it because they made it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we're like, can be very focused on like, I just want them to eat the food. But there's so much else that goes into it. I mean, it could even be like, we're going to do a coloring page of broccoli today. Again, like that just exposure in such a like different type of environment can really help to just, take some of the weight off of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, talk to us about these tips, these strategies. Like, how can parents encourage kids to try new foods without that power struggle, that resistance that can often happen?
Sure. Well, I want to say first that there's a lot of different approaches to this, and I'm going to share what's worked for us and kind of what our approach has been. And one of the very first things that we sort of did from the very beginning was to take away the labels of food. And instead of saying, you need to eat this broccoli, it's good for you, or it's healthy for you, we just present it in a very like neutral type of way. This is broccoli. You can try it if you want. Sometimes I'll ask my 3-year-old like, "Do you want to try it?" And sometimes he will and he might spit it out, but it's like almost putting it in his lap, not physically, but making it his decision can really help. And I think that goes a long way as they get older too. But yeah, so first thing is just being mindful of how we present foods because if we're always saying this is healthy, this is good, that's bad, that it just adds to a whole host of food issues down the road. So that's the first thing I really encourage parents to do is just try to have this neutral language with food. You can talk about why it's healthy for you, maybe. So it has vitamins, blah, blah, blah. Carrots can help your eyesight, things like that. And that's a way to show the kids this is good for you without giving it that language of this is good, which means some other food that they like must be bad. And then another like really practical tip is when you are presenting any type of new food, it doesn't even have to be something like broccoli. It could be a new dinner recipe that you're trying. Always try to have a safe food on the table as well. So there are times often where I might serve a new meal and my boys only eat the rice. That's fine. You know, if the rice is what they are excited about and what they feel safe eating, that's great. Eventually, again, down the road, they might see that exact same recipe again and be like, oh, I remember this. Maybe I'll try it. My middle son in particular often will I'll serve something that he's forgotten that he likes, and he'll serve it, or I will serve it, and he'll be like, "Oh, what is that?" And I'll say, "It's butter chicken. You liked this last time I made it." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I did like this last time." And then he'll eat it. But sometimes it's just that like, you know, how we serve it, or it looks different to them. And so sometimes it's just encouraging them or reminding them, like, "Oh, this is similar to some other meal that you enjoyed." But there have been many times where they just eat that rice or they eat the fruit or whatever it is that they are feeling comfortable with. And we don't offer some other meal to them. We don't say, well, you didn't eat dinner, so you need to have a snack before bed. We just, that's dinner and they get to make the choice. I often will say, mom and dad choose what goes on the plate at dinner. You get to choose how much you eat. And that, again, that control and that ability for them to make that choice goes a long way over time for them to understand that it is their choice. And I'm not going to force them to take a bite of something just to, make me feel better that I made the food for them or whatever. Is that helpful? Does that seem like it's something that resonates for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love this idea of the safe food aspect because it also makes me feel like too, like I'm not going to take it as personally. Because,
Mhm.
right, sometimes we do put a lot of effort into making dinners. And I mean, in this house, it's like a miracle if everyone in the family likes the thing that's made for dinner. And so I love that aspect of having that one safe food or that one thing that kids are going to gravitate towards, at least the picky eaters, that they'll eat something. And I don't feel like, yes, like I'm doing a second round of dinner 2 hours later when everyone's hungry or
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think another helpful tip, and this is kind of going back to that idea of like getting the kids involved in different ways, is especially when you have those kids who just never seem to like what you make for dinner, try to get them involved in the planning process. And that can go a long way too. And I will say straight up, when you first ask them, like, what should we have for dinner? They're probably going to say pizza, hot dogs, burgers, some food that they really love, and try to honor that every once in a while. Like I know it's tempting to be like, oh, that's not what I want to eat for dinner. But like, is there a way that you can make it so that you do want to eat it for dinner? Or it just becomes something that you can do every once in a while. But that I'm actually really surprised now when I offer that to my kids, what they will come up with. Again, the first thing they're going to usually say is those burgers, hot dogs, whatever. And then they'll remember something that we haven't had in a while that they really liked. And then they'll pick that. And we're like, that's awesome. And then when we get to that point of making that food, they're like, oh yeah, I picked that. Can I help? Can I do this? Or they're like just excited about the process because it wasn't something that just happened to them. They were involved in that process.
Such a good idea. I love that. And I feel like too, like even the most, I don't know, like quote unquote unhealthiest foods or foods that you wouldn't normally pick on your meal planning menu, like there are hacks and things you can do to make them a little bit more healthy at home, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it really is all about balance. Like I'm not saying that you should eat those foods every single day, but it's kind of like, again, the whole like pick your battle thing. Yes, you want to make healthier food, but you also want your kids to be able to enjoy the food with you and be able to create that family unity too. So if one night out of the month you're eating something that maybe doesn't fit in the box of what you would consider to be a healthy food, like that's okay. It is not the end of the world. And it's just inching you closer and closer to a different goal. It might not be just like, I want my kids to eat a salad for dinner or whatever, is in your mind as kind of what healthy means. But it can help you to just take down that barrier between like, if I'm going to make something that's healthy, only I'm going to eat it. And it creates that unity between your family.
Yeah. So good. What do you think is the key to moving kids away from like kid food or processed food or things that, they love?
Sure. Well, I think kind of a lot of the things we've already been talking about, like recognizing why that is to begin with. It's usually because those are somehow safe foods for them. And I think if we're all honest, like we all would love to eat those foods every once in a while too. The reason we don't as adults is we know what about it is maybe unhealthy to us or how it makes our bodies feel. And kids just have different metabolisms, different bodies. So it's very different. And so I think sometimes it is just about limiting that exposure of those foods over time. You're not going to be able to go from like that's their whole diet to shutting it off overnight because that's really hard and that is not going to feel fair to them. But maybe it's like you were saying, you can make a healthier version. So instead of like, the Kraft mac and cheese, can you make a homemade mac and cheese instead? By default, already you're going to be in a much healthier camp because it's with, whole ingredients versus like processed foods. Um, but I think it's also just having conversations with them over time. And I mentioned not like demonizing foods, but again, maybe you can over time start to give them the language of like why they might want to choose something different over that, or why they might want to limit how often they're eating those processed foods. And I think that comes a lot easier when they get older. Actually, it's really funny. My almost 10-year-old and I were having a conversation this morning about calories. He was like, what does that mean? And so we had a conversation about how like my husband and me and them as kids like have all these different needs for calories. And I wasn't saying anything negative about calories. I was just like, this is a matter of fact of this is what this is. And so having those conversations over time and in environments where it's not like you put a plate of food in front of them at dinner and you're trying to make them eat it, talk about it in like a much more, level-headed type of or part of your day where there's not that pressure for them. So I think that exposure to new foods over time, can you take some of those, healthy kid foods and make them healthier for them to present them in a different way? And then third, just having those conversations over time to help just widen their perspectives of why it is that you're saying you don't want them to eat chicken nuggets again for dinner. But I think, yeah, just taking back some of that control as, the person who's deciding what's for dinner and making sure that you're doing it in a way that is kind of sustainable for your family long term.
Yeah. Yeah. Love this. Can you tell us any personal stories or things that you've experienced in helping your kids develop healthier habits or helping your picky eaters? You said your middle son, I think, is a picky eater. Like, give us like the behind the scenes look in your house of like what's going on, what you're doing, and then we're going to move into our lightning round.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so like I mentioned, he does have a tendency to maybe dislike some new foods and things like that. One thing in particular that he cannot stand, we'd have no idea where this came from. He does not like onions. And I mean, if you like to cook at all, onions are in like everything because they're delicious and they add so much flavor and all of that. And so, one of the practical things that I do is I make sure I'm not picking meals multiple days in a row that have onions in them because I just know he's going to start to feel like, oh, I can never eat anything. And so I will try to make sure that I, choose some meals that don't have that to make sure that he's, not feeling like he's getting attacked or anything like that. And then every once in a while, we'll have something that does have it in there. And sometimes I might like leave some off on the side so he doesn't have it with the onions. Sometimes I will leave it in there and just show him, like, you can pick that out if you don't want it. But I've also asked him lots of questions and I've gotten really curious with him to understand why it is that he doesn't like the onions. Mostly he said texture, that it's just he doesn't like the crunch of it. He will eat raw red onions and stuff, which is very interesting to me. But again, I've just asked those questions over time to kind of understand. And then I've given him opportunities to maybe try something with it. I've chopped, onions super, super small. So it's like you can't really see them. And he'll know that they're in there, but he's more willing to try it. And then other times they might be large, so he can pick around them. So those are kind of some of the practical examples with that particular food. But again, like I mentioned earlier, oftentimes we will serve something and like I know without a doubt that they're not going to eat whatever vegetable it is. And I still serve it anyway. I might just serve like one piece because I, one, don't want to waste the food, but two, I want them to feel like they're not being, attacked with like all this food that they don't want. And that's like strong language, but that's kind of how it feels to them. So it might just be like one little piece of broccoli instead of like the big serving that I might have. Another thing that is just kind of a practical thing is I will maybe talk about like what I like about that. So I might say, well, I really love that this broccoli is really crispy or it has, lots of flavor from being roasted or something like that. And again, I'm not trying to make them say those things or feel those things, but I'm just sharing my perspective so that maybe someday they might be curious about trying it themselves as well. trying to think if there's any other. I mentioned the dip thing earlier. So, like, I would say typically we don't necessarily offer like a sauce with everything, but there are some times when I know something is maybe going to be new to them or that I can just tell they're just not going to eat it. And so I'll have a couple of like maybe homemade sauces, or my middle son, he loves buffalo sauce. So I think the other day I made like some kind of chicken and he was being weird about it. And so I'm like, do you want to put buffalo sauce on that? Sure enough, he did. He ate the whole thing and he loved it. So sometimes it's just, being willing to like make those compromises, but it isn't the same compromise as like, let's make a whole different dinner for somebody else, or like, let's just let them have cereal for dinner later type of thing. So for me, that's like a compromise I'm willing to make in order for him to be able to enjoy dinner with us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Such a good idea for sure. All right, Madison, we are at the point in our show where we're going to run through some random fun personal questions just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very curious which ones you're going to pick.
All right, here we go. Well, I have to start with this one. I feel like if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be? Calories don't count.
Oh man, yes, I saw that on the list and then I did not think of an option. I would say probably a burger of some kind. So I would switch up like what kind of burger, and, bunless, lettuce wrap with a bun, like all kinds of things. Cause I just feel like there's so much variety that you can do within that. And if I had to be stuck to like one thing forever, that would probably be it.
That is such a good food blogger response. So much versatility there.
Too, because I feel like tacos are very versatile too, but I'm just in a burger mood today, I guess.
Yeah, love it. No, so good. So good. What is one app that you just can't live without?
Ooh, like my phone is right here. I need to look at it. Actually, there is an app. I haven't been using it recently, but I need to get back into it. And it's one of the apps that actually like shuts down other apps during certain times. And I feel like as a working mom, that is like so important for me. Just because like when I'm working on something and I need to be focused, like I want to be focused. So I think the one that I'm thinking of is called Refocus. And you can actually just like set, limits for certain apps, or say like this app isn't allowed during this time. I feel like that's kind of a cheat answer because it's like an app, but it's for no apps. But it's really, really helpful from a like focus perspective.
Such a great answer. I love it for the productivity aspect. That's amazing. I haven't tried that. All right. What if you could have any superpower? What would it be?
I feel like I would want to be able to like move at super speed. Just to be able to like travel easier. I think it would make, the time to travel so much easier to be able to just like pop over somewhere right away.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last question. What's something most people don't know about you?
That is also a good question. I would have formally probably said that I was a picky eater because that's definitely not something that's like apparent in my, life today. I would say the other thing is that I actually double majored in graphic design and Spanish. I originally wanted to do like something in advertising, like using those two things, and I am very far from that nowadays. But that's something that I feel like at this point in my life, being in my 30s, like we don't really talk about like college that often. So a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, good fun fact. Thank you. All right. Well, before we wrap up, tell our listeners where they can find you, get your recipes, find your blog, find your podcast. Give us all the details.
Yes, for sure. Well, the blog is called Cook at Home Mom. So you can find that by either Googling that or just going to cookathomemom.com. And like you mentioned, we have tons of different recipes that, fit within certain diets, but also are just like very neutral in the diet territory in terms of like they can fit into the box that you need them to fit into. They're very flexible and customizable in that way. I hang out the most on Instagram. So I like to share, videos of like how to make certain recipes. I'm doing like a snack series right now over there. So that's Instagram.com, obviously, slash cook at home mom. And then I actually have something really exciting that's coming out, which is called the Balanced Dinner Club. And it's going to be basically a meal planning service. So you're going to be getting 2 weeks of weeknight dinners specifically that are designed to just take the guesswork out of it. So if you have, questions about like, what is healthy? What should I eat? What should I put on my meal plan? That type of thing. It's going to take all of that guesswork out of it for you, and it will be just provided for you. And I hope that it will really make just eating healthy and eating delicious meals super, super achievable for families. So that is also on the website if you're interested in learning more about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for being here. I can't wait to implement some of these ideas and tips and tricks because I will say I love cooking, but it takes a toll when the people you're cooking for don't eat it. So
Yes, for sure.
I am eager to check out your site, check out your recipes, and implement those tips. So thank you so much, Madison.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I definitely hope that they help. And if there's anything I can help you troubleshoot, you just reach out and I'm happy to chat with you or any of your listeners about like specific things that you guys are struggling with.
Awesome. Thanks.